Hey, Robert Dugan here from the talent community. This is our first ever podcast, and we're really excited to have our very first guest, Corey Shaw, who is a leader of talent acquisition from the Cooperators. Hey, Corey, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thanks, Robert. Great to be here. Doing well.
So I'm really excited that we're doing this show today, and you're our first guest. And so, one of the topics that we kind of wanted to talk about today was around building a talent acquisition strategy. And I kind of wanted to ask you some questions around, building a talent acquisition strategy. Pick your brain, because the show is all about, helping people recruit better. And we say, let's recruit better together. And we figure we always try to bring in all these talent community experts in areas. And of course, you've built some talent acquisition strategies, with a number of companies over the years. And I've always coined you as what I call the builder. And so you've got the foundation to know how to build out an effective talent acquisition strategy. So I thought maybe I just ask you a few questions, and maybe we can kind of, teach our audience a few little tips and tricks about building a talent acquisition strategy. So wanted to know, where do you get started when you start building out a talent acquisition strategy? Like, what are some of the things that we need to think about when we do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Where do you start? And I always try to start with, deeply understanding what the organization is trying to achieve. Its business imperative. It's where is it growing? Where is it changing or transforming? And what are those critical success factors that will drive that? And as you get that picture formed and that perspective about it, alongside that, you definitely want to understand, where is the organization's talent maturity is the term I use. And to understand where, what is the strength of its employment brand? What does it have good processes in place in terms of recruitment, and what does that candidate experience look like? How is the organization at sort of intersecting, business planning and workforce planning? And once you get that clear picture, and you can do it through surveys, you can definitely do internal sort of stakeholder meetings, and you get that clarity of the organization's business mandate. You get the clarity of where the talent acquisition maturity is at. Then you can start to step back and say, okay, with some insight on both of those key items, then you can start to build what that strategy looks like, and call it the North Star. And what is that vision of what talent acquisition is going to be in the coming years? And you always want to keep that vision highly targeted and authentic to the organization's reality. And I always say you want to bring folks along. So I've been honored to lead talent acquisition programs, and it always takes a village, as I like to say. So you want to bring together constituents, people from the business, people from HR, people from the talent acquisition team. And you want to have a couple of those key ideation sessions where, you've got the insight, as I shared, on the business side and the talent acquisition, the maturity side. And then you start to draw out from them, what they see as an incredibly strategic, optimized talent acquisition program looks like. I've led teams in the past, and thank you for calling me the builder. I do see myself as a builder, but you know what? I don't. You always want to say, what's that right fit to purpose strategy for the organization? And part of doing that is getting people's excitement and buy-in on it. So you have these ideation sessions, and you start to form, a clearer picture of what that place looks like. And I say it's a place because it takes time. It takes time to really understand where the organization's at, and then form that North Star, that vision. And then from there, what I like to do is, have a very intentional recipe of building the strategy underneath the vision, and describing what that strategic place looks like, and some of the proof points of that strategic place. And then as you go along that, you say, okay, if this is the strategic destination, if these are some of those key proof points, then how are you going to measure success? And so that's where I really spend a lot of time with my colleagues in analytics and my colleagues in finance and my colleagues in marketing, because what you really want to do, I think, is draw out to say, okay, if this is what success looks like in 2 or 3 years, how can you help us measure current state to get to future state? And that could mean a variety of things, but talent acquisition is no different than any other business. You're really looking at, what is that operating model? And so you build a very intentional operating model with trusted processes, technology, with the activities and the behaviors to be successful. And you start to track that level of success, whether it's as semantic as things like time to fill or vacancy rates, or perhaps you're looking at shortlist to hire ratios, and these are all efficiency metrics. But the ones that get me up in the morning are when you're able to build out those links to effectiveness, to quality of hire, Robert. And what does that mean? And so you start to say, okay, what? When we reach that destination, what will it look like? That we hire folks that are more productive, people that are more engaged, and they're more retained, and they're diverse and they're inclusive. And ultimately, when you're hiring externally, do they have that succession trajectory? Once you get that clear picture of hiring quality, then it's a matter of starting to, build the tactics and the program level activity to help get you to that destination. And that's the journey. That's the execution. That's the hard part, Robert. I always say this. I mean, you've got to have an amazing strategy and a fit to purpose approach for the organization with a vision and that clarity of destination. That's the planning side, and that's critically important. But you and I know the hard part is execution, and it's sort of focusing on the right activities, the right momentum, the right measurement to ensure that you're getting to that destination. That's sort of, a bit of an approach I like to take in terms of building a talent acquisition strategy.
So I got a couple questions for you. So like one of them was you mentioned the word maturity quite a bit just right now. And so when I think about maturity, is how do you, if you're coming into an organization today, and you're going to help somebody, how would you determine their maturity level? I mean, because you've actually built out, talent acquisition strategies within a few number of large organizations. And so day one, what is, how do you, is there different levels of maturity? Is there different stages? I'm just curious, share with our audience.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? There's lots of great models out there. CEB has a model, certainly, organizations that have that deep expertise in talent. And so what you want to do is do your research, understand what are those levels of maturity. We use terms like, are you in a reactive phase? Are you in a sort of a standardized phase? Are you in an integrated phase? Or are you in that strategic optimized phase? And so those are sort of the levels I'm used to using that then you say to yourself, well, what does that mean when you're in a reactive phase? And, you start to break that down, and it usually comes down to the fact that you don't have a clear line of sight on trusted processes and data, or you might have very inconsistent talent acquisition approach across the organization, or you might have situations where certain parts of talent acquisition, we don't know how the organization is managing that. And then you start to move into the standardized phase, and you say, okay, you know what, we do have a good baseline process, and we do have trusted data, but but we are not as impactful and effective as we might want to be. And it could be many areas. It could be how the organization shows up at external events with the right branding material, or it could be having a structured interview process where you're confident that the organization is reducing bias and creating objectivity. And then you start to move to the integrated phase, and then you say, well, what does that mean? And you start to talk about, we all know in talent acquisition it takes great collaborative partnerships, and what I always call integrated processes and technology and behaviors. And so that's where you start to see, really good line of sight to integrated activities. And it might be you're going on campus at a key post-secondary event, and you're going there and you've planned it very well with the marketing group, and the all the parts of talent acquisition are representing those different areas of the organization. And the event is really well managed in terms of showing off the organization's brand. Or it could be as simple as when you're managing a search, there's clarity to who owns what parts of the decision process. We all know in talent acquisition, we're in the people business. And so, you have to manage offers, sometimes in a customized approach tied to certain candidate pools. So when you're making that offer, are the right people aware or informed? Who owns the D, as we like to say, in terms of making the decision? And then you move to the last phase, that incredible place, that strategic optimized phase of talent acquisition. And that's a phase where you've got standardized activities and trusted data, and technologies and processes and behaviors are all intersecting. And you've got an incredible brand that's being amplified regularly to the world. And you've got that brand, that employment brand and the consumer brand highly immersed. You've got leaders as talent champions, one of my favorite sayings, where you've got leaders that are exceptional at finance and marketing and sales and operations, but they're wearing a second hat, and that second hat is that talent hat. And so they're excited to go to an event to network potential talent. They love doing interviewing, and they get the fact that they're kind of dualistically wooing the talent as they're validating their fit to the role, and they enjoy the opportunity to add great talent to their teams. And as they work with their human resources colleagues, with their talent acquisition colleagues, they're those talent champions. And so I could say a lot more about that phase, but those would be the highlights of what those talent maturity phases look like.
No, that's really, really helpful. I'm also kind of curious about, like, how do you assure the linkage between like strategy and also like program level activities with operations and talent outcomes? I'm just kind of curious about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So if you step back and you think about it, and you have a vision, you've got a strategy, and you've got good baseline processes in terms of how you're using your talent technologies, everything from the job boards to your applicant tracking system to your use of maybe assessment testing, these types of things. But how do you make sure that that linkage happens? I have this term: you've got to have an effective operating model. And what does that mean? Well, it means that when you're thinking about the key phases of talent acquisition in a large organization, really what you're starting with is the intersection of workforce planning and people planning. And when you start to intersect that in a deliberate way, with a big annual deep dive, and you've got trusted data like turnover, like what are the succession gaps look like? What does some of that external marketplace data look like in those areas you're hiring for, those talent pools and those geocentric areas? And you take that wisdom and you start to be very intentional. And two favorite words in recruitment, Robert, have always been, that allows you to be proactive and targeted. And so then it allows you to move into the attraction phase and the sourcing phase, and then ultimately the assessment phase, and finally the pipelining and hiring phase. And those are the key areas of execution, which you can be intentional about, and you can be focused and targeted because you've got that insight from that planning phase, that intersection of workforce planning and people planning. And the last thing I'd say is that anytime leadership or the organization is making that push to hire, we use these terms. You've heard them before. We need to make a blitz. We need to hire X number of people by the end of the month, and we've got to achieve that to keep the lights on, or whatever it is the organization's trying to achieve. My answer always is, how have we failed? Like, there's something wrong in the planning phase if the organization is rushing to hire or has a big burning platform all at once, because when you do that, you have less opportunity to be proactive, to be targeted, to be intentional, to use those words. You're just gonna pay more for the talent, and it's going to not be as strong talent as you would if you were being intentional. So that's why I kind of obsess about the planning side, and then put our best foot forward where we know we should be, because we know that, yes, talent is highly in demand, but we also know that it's more in demand in some areas than others. And so it allows you to focus on those areas more than others when it comes to putting that targeted focus forward.
Yeah. I was going to ask you another question, which is, and I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about this. I mean, you've worked in big organizations. Do you sometimes find some areas get into kind of panic mode, and like, how do you like manage and mitigate that panic mode, especially as you're building out this talent strategy? Because they're like, we need to put so many people into these positions, we have 30 roles to fill. Or I mean, how do you manage that as you're building it up? Because I mean, you're probably still like building out your team. I mean, how do you manage those expectations?
Well, you know what, one of my favorite sayings, sort of that disciplined approach. And I talked about that planning session, and maybe you do it on an annualized basis, but you and I know, life happens, the year happens, the organization is learning and changing as that year happens. So I always love to have quarterly check-ins with those key organizational leaders to bring forward the planning insight and ensure that if you need to course correct or pivot or tweak, you can do that. I would also say that, what I always like to do in those big push periods is I like to talk about what does that baseline success look like? And so, for example, you might say, by the end of the first quarter, we need to hire X number of people tied to this critical project. And so then you work with that leader and you say, okay, what is absolutely the most critical talent we need on this project to ensure sort of success in the first phase, and where can we focus on, and where can we maybe sort of the difference between must-haves and nice-to-haves, and then you start to break that down, because I do think when you're dealing with those push periods, what you don't want to give a let on is hiring quality. As much as possible, so it allows you to focus in the moment on what those key roles would be. That's sort of how I like to do it. And my last comment would be, most importantly, we do understand that there are those rally periods. And so you want to get folks excited about that. And that's where I always say it truly is a test of an organization's sort of integrated fortitude. And you bring together the right folks, Robert. You bring together the talent acquisition team, the operations people, the other parts of HR, the leadership, usually a good project manager and him or her, and you have a kickoff and you get people excited and you say, you know what, we have a critical organizational push to hire this amount of talent in this amount of time. We're the people to do it. Here's what everybody is going to do. Here's how we're going to rally. Here's what success is going to look like. And then most importantly, when you achieve that success, you celebrate it. Because what you want people to do is to understand that they feel really good about the efforts they made to help the organization meet its talent goals.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we've had these conversations before where we talk to other talent acquisition leaders, and it seems to be the same message, especially these days in such a tight talent market. And everybody seems to be drinking from that fire hose, and they're feeling overwhelmed. And I mean, what's your message to people who are feeling that pressure or stress of feeling overwhelmed and trying to find that talent these days? Like, what would you say to them to where should they start in order to make like maybe their talent strategy effective? I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is an intense talent market these days. Big terms, Robert. We've heard them many times before: the great exodus, the great resignation, certainly that new societal employment contract, as the pandemic sort of I say this carefully, ends, and the changes that are going along that we know are big longitudinal talent landscape changes. And so, I always say to folks, keep focused on what you do best, what your expertise is, on giving, if you're a recruiter, being that trusted advisor, and giving great advice about your expertise in the external marketplace, and understanding what the organization's trying to achieve on the talent agenda, and then coalesce that and give great insights to the leadership, whether it's on a search or whether it's on a broader talent dynamic. And the most important is, these days, there's tremendous opportunity to show up with data that turns into intelligence, and, use your organization's capabilities, work with the finance folks, work with the marketing folks, work with your talent acquisition team in terms of the technologies, and bring forward that insight to those meetings. And, I do find that, sometimes organizations will say, so and so organization is rating our talent, and at the end of the day, you want to show up to that meeting and say, well, there's kind of a half truth there. Yeah, we've lost a few people to that organization, but you know what, interestingly, we've hired as much of that from that organization as they've hired from us. It's just in different ways. And so you bring that gravitas forward, you bring that perspective forward. Most importantly, you move the conversation to what's meaningful, which is, what is the reality of the talent dynamic, right? Where is the talent looking to join in terms of the changes of turnover, disruptions in the marketplace, understand sort of what those organizations are trying to achieve. Most importantly, understand what success looks like in your organization, and then just move forward together. But data turned into intelligence can explode those myths, can allow that focused conversation, and move yourself away from some of the anxiety that is there just for the sake of, given the situation. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and it's just one last question before we probably close out, and I just want to kind of just get your thoughts on this. Is if you had any, like, if you were to give anybody any insight out there, like what from your experience, what are the biggest hurdles to overcome when trying to implement a talent strategy? I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
That is a great question. I think probably the biggest hurdle is working collaboratively with the great talent acquisition. Is about everybody buying in that that they're selling the organization. It's an incredible place to work. They, as I shared earlier, they might be in their marketing area, finance, operations, sales, and they're very focused on their business mandate, as so they should be. But they're wearing that other hat, that talent hat. And so whether it's talent acquisition recruiters as those evangelists, or whether it's those leaders as talent champions, what you really want to do is you want to create a talent culture. And we always say that, like culture evolution, that's just plain hard, but once you've got that organization bought into the fact that you're kind of dualistically selling the organization as an incredible place to do business, as well as an amazing place to have a career, that's the sweet spot. And that takes time. So, my advice is, focus on those early champions, those people that just love the talent dynamic, and encourage them. And then that beautiful ripple effect happens. Is the last thing I would say, is that other people want to get they want to join the party. They want to help out as well. And then you see that ripple effect broaden across the organization with its leaders. And that's when you know you've achieved that place where everybody's pulling on the rope. Everybody's saying this is an incredible place to work or do business, and you should check us out.
No, that's really incredibly insightful, because a lot of people don't think about, creating those internal champions. And while everybody's got, competing demands with their own business lines, etc., everybody's a talent champion. And I think that's really important. And I really appreciate your insights here. I think, these little nuggets, I think, are going to help a lot of people out in the marketplace and better understanding how to kind of think about their talent strategy. And I want to thank you for joining us here on the show. And I appreciate you always, with your insights that you provide to me. And I've got a few things that I've written down as well. So I just want to thank you, Corey, for being part of the show. And for those of you out there, if you're interested in learning more about the talent community, we got a lot of great insights. We're going to be doing a lot more shows like this with talent experts like Corey Shaw. And don't forget to visit our website, radpotential.com, and click on our talent community and become a subscriber. So Corey, thanks again for coming on the show, and we'll hopefully see you soon. Maybe we'll meet up for a little talent talk and coffee sometime.
That would be great, Robert. Thanks for having me today.